There are places that hold more than just furniture and photographs. They hold the echoes of a life, the phantom scent of ambition, the faint, lingering warmth of a man's truest self, pressed into the very wood and stone. For Chuck Connors, the man who stood as a colossus in the American imagination, that place wasn't a soundstage in Hollywood, bathed in the artificial glow of studio lights. It was a sprawling, rugged kingdom hewn from the California high desert, a place he molded not just with his money, but with the sweat of his brow and the full force of his formidable will. And if you could stand there today amidst the profound silence carried on the desert wind, you might begin to understand the deep central contradiction of the man America knew and loved as the Rifleman. You see, the house that truly defined Chuck Connors wasn't merely a home, it was a fortress. It was a declaration of independence built against the very world that had granted him fame and fortune. And its story, a saga of ambition, love, and profound loneliness, doesn't truly end with the quiet turning of a key in a lock. It begins there, in the vast empty spaces he left behind, raising a question that haunts his legacy like a ghost in the chaparral. What happens when a giant falls, and who is left to shoulder the weight of the world he single-handedly built? This is the story of a man's heart, told through the language of architecture, land, and the raw, untamed earth he called home. Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors was a man built of right angles and sheer, unadulterated force. He entered the world in Brooklyn in 1921, a borough of brick, concrete, and relentless human energy. His parents, immigrants from Newfoundland, Canada, were working-class people who instilled in him the unglamorous, unshakable values of discipline and labor. His father, Alban, was a longshoreman, his mother, Marcella, a homemaker. Life in their Bay Ridge neighborhood was not one of introspective, artistic pursuits. It was a world of stickball games on asphalt, of close-knit communities where a man's worth was measured by the strength of his back and the firmness of his word. This upbringing forged in him an ironclad sense of identity, but it also planted a seed, a yearning for something more, for a physical and spiritual expanse that Brooklyn's crowded geography could never offer. From his earliest days, his body was his currency, standing at a towering 6'6" with a jaw that looked like it was carved from the granite quarries of New England. He was a physical anomaly long before he was a star. His early life was a testament to a ferocious, almost primal athletic drive. He wasn't just good at sports, he was a paradox of talent, a vessel of such coordinated power that he could excel at the highest echelons of multiple disciplines. It is a fact that has become a piece of trivia, but its implications are profound. He is one of only 13 athletes in history to have played in both Major League Baseball and the National Basketball Association. Think of what that means. He possessed the brute strength and explosive verticality to battle for rebounds under the basket for the Boston Celtics in the league's formative years, a time of sharp elbows and punishing physicality. Yet, he also had the refined motor skills, the eagle eye, and the whip-fast reflexes to stand in a batter's box and stare down a pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and later, the Chicago Cubs. His teammates from both sports remembered him less for his finesse and more for his presence. He was a character, a booming voice on the court, and a clubhouse lawyer in the dugout. He was opinionated, fiercely competitive, and carried himself with an unshakable confidence that could be mistaken for arrogance. This athletic crucible, the daily grind, the constant travel, the ruthless competition, was his true university. It taught him that success was earned through sweat, that authority had to be asserted, and that a man's domain was something to be aggressively defended. It was a lesson he would carry from the locker room directly into his living room. His transition to acting was not the graceful pivot of a modern athlete celebrity. It was a desperate scramble. His sports career, while historic, was not financially lucrative. He was a journeyman, never quite achieving the superstar status that guaranteed security. With a wife, Elizabeth, and a growing family of 4 sons to support, he drifted to Los Angeles, chasing the last resort of the handsome and the hopeful, Hollywood. At first, his immense size was a liability. He was too big, too imposing to be a believable romantic lead, too distracting to blend into a scene. He took bit parts, playing heavies, thugs, and nameless soldiers, his powerful instrument reduced to a single, menacing note. Then, a casting director for the Tracy and Hepburn film, Pat and Mike, saw him playing first base for the Los Angeles Angels, a minor league club. They needed athletes who could act a little, and Connors fit the bill. It was a tiny role, but it was a start. The breakthrough, when it came, was like lightning striking. In 1958, the legendary producer Sam Peckinpah was casting a new kind of Western. He was looking for an actor who could embody a character of unimpeachable integrity, a man who was both a gentle, loving father and a stone-cold protector. He needed Lucas McCain. When the towering Chuck Connors walked into the audition, the search was over. His role in The Rifleman was more than just a piece of acting. It was a cosmic alignment of man and myth. Lucas McCain was the archetypal American hero, a widowed father raising his son Mark on the rugged frontier of North Fork. He was a man of quiet dignity, immense capability, and unwavering moral clarity. He solved problems not with rage, but with wisdom, and when wisdom failed, with a custom-modified Winchester rifle, he could fire with the speed of thought. For the 40 million viewers who tuned in each week, Chuck Connors was Lucas McCain. The line between actor and character blurred into non-existence. What the public didn't fully grasp was that the role allowed Chuck to project an idealized version of himself onto the national consciousness. He was playing the man he desperately aspired to be, a perfect father, an unshakable pillar of strength, a man in complete control of his world. The reality, as it always is, was far more complex, a tapestry of love, ambition, and deep-seated insecurities. The clues to that complex reality were not in the television scripts he memorized, but in the very bricks, mortar, and soil of the homes he chose. Early in his burgeoning success, Connors did what was expected. He settled his family into a home that represented the quintessential American dream, amplified by the Klieg lights of Hollywood. He bought a large, comfortable house in Woodland Hills, a leafy, affluent enclave in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley. It was a classic 1950s ranch-style home, low-slung and sprawling, with plenty of room for his 4 growing boys, Mike, Jeff, Stephen, and Kevin. This house was his public statement. It declared that Chuck Connors, the boy from the Brooklyn docks, had arrived. From the outside, it was the picture of suburban success. A perfectly manicured lawn, a shimmering blue pool in the backyard where the boys could escape the valley heat, a reliable station wagon parked in the driveway. It was the kind of home a successful television star was supposed to have, a perfect backdrop for magazine photographers and puff pieces about his idyllic family life. Inside, however, the house was a stage for a far more intimate and intense drama. It was the bustling command center for a family of 6, presided over by a father who was often larger than the rooms themselves. His sons, in later interviews, have painted a picture of a household that ran on abundant love, but also on a kind of quasi-military precision, dictated by their larger-than-life father. He was a stickler for rules, for manners, for respect. His booming voice could fill every corner of the house. He was the undisputed patriarch, the sun around which his family orbited. This Woodland Hills home was a container, an attempt to pour his enormous, restless energy into a socially acceptable mold. It was the place where he performed the role of Chuck Connor's family man. Yet this suburban box, with its neat property lines and neighborhood covenants, could never truly contain him. His soul was not meant for manicured lawns and two-car garages. He was a man of the earth, a former athlete who understood the profound poetry of an open field and a limitless horizon. The Woodland Hills house was a base of operations, a safe and loving harbor for his family, but it was not the landscape of his heart. He needed more. He needed a kingdom. He found it piece by piece in the starkly beautiful, rugged high desert of California. His first taste was a 20-acre property in Apple Valley, a place to breathe, to escape the smog and the sycophancy of Hollywood. But even that felt confining. His ambition, his very essence, demanded a grander scale. He then acquired the property that would become legend, a vast 400-acre ranch nestled in the mountains near Tehachapi, a remote and challenging landscape that deterred the casual and the faint-hearted. This wasn't a gentleman's farm or a celebrity retreat for weekend photo ops. This was the Chuck Connors Ranch, and it became the living, breathing, physical extension of his entire being. The journey from the clipped hedges of Woodland Hills to the untamed expanse of Tehachapi was the most honest architectural statement he could ever make. It was a rejection of the life he was supposed to want in favor of the life his spirit demanded. The ranch was not designed by a famed Beverly Hills architect seeking to create a monument to celebrity. It was designed in its soul by Chuck Connors. The main house itself was a masterpiece of rustic functionality. It was a rambling, single-story structure built with thick wooden beams and local stone, designed to blend into the landscape rather than dominate it. It prioritized comfort and utility over ostentatious display. This was a home built to withstand the harsh desert seasons and the boisterous energy of 4 growing boys. The interiors were a reflection of the man's character, honest, strong, and deeply unpretentious. The rooms were filled with wood, stone, and worn leather. The furniture was heavy, solid, and comfortable, meant to be used, not just admired. A massive stone fireplace big enough to stand in served as the gravitational center of the main living area. This was his throne room, the place where he could hold court, his massive frame sunk deep into a favorite chair, a cigarette, his constant companion and eventual betrayer, smoldering between his fingers. There were no delicate vases or priceless antiques. This was a space of lived-in reality, smelling of wood smoke, coffee, and the faint, clean scent of the desert air. But the house was always secondary to the land. Connors didn't just own the ranch. He was its steward, its master, its most dedicated servant. He didn't hire a legion of workers to do the hard labor. He worked it himself, rising with the sun, his powerful body finding purpose in the physical demands of the land. He ran cattle, their lowing calls echoing in the canyons. He spent grueling hours digging trenches and laying pipes to irrigate the thirsty soil. He built miles of fences with his own 2 hands, his palms calloused, his face weathered by the sun and wind. His sons weren't treated like the privileged children of a Hollywood icon. They were his ranch hands. This was his most important classroom. They were woken up at dawn, not by a gentle nudge, but by their father's booming voice. They learned to ride, to rope, to fix a combustion engine, to mend what was broken. They were taught the unglamorous, essential value of sweat and toil. This ranch was his real-life North Fork, a crucible where he could attempt to forge the values of Lucas McCain, self-sufficiency, integrity, resilience into the character of his own sons, far from what he saw as the corrupting, softening influence of Hollywood. The most telling, most deeply personal feature of the entire 400-acre property was the one that produced no income and served no practical purpose. It was the baseball diamond, and this was not some quaint backstop and a patch of worn grass. Chuck Connors, the man who'd had a taste of the big leagues and never lost that hunger, built a full-scale, professional dimension baseball field in the middle of his mountain wilderness. He obsessed over it. He irrigated it with precious water, manicured its infield, and chalked its lines with a devotion that bordered on the sacred. This field was his cathedral. It was a shrine to his first love, a magnificent monument to the athletic dreams that still burned hot within him. Here, surrounded by the vastness of his private kingdom, he could step onto the pitcher's mound or into the batter's box. And he wasn't just Chuck Connors, the actor who played a hero. He was Chuck Connors, the ball player, a man of pure muscle and instinct, forever playing out the bottom of the ninth in a World Series that existed only in his heart. It was a place of ritual, of memory, and perhaps of regret for a path not fully taken. He would host games there, bringing in old-timers and friends, the crack of the bat echoing in a place more accustomed to the cry of the hawk. If the Woodland Hills house was his public-facing statement of success, the ranch was his private declaration of soul. The suburban home was a container for his family life, structured, predictable, and always on display. It was where he tried to fit into the conventional mold of a 1960s American husband and father. The ranch, by contrast, was a sprawling, untamable landscape where his spirit could break free from that mold. The house in the valley was about conformity. The ranch was about conquest, over the land and over himself. One was a place of quiet, sometimes tense domesticity. The other was a theater of grand physical effort and solitary contemplation. He desperately needed both. He needed the anchor of his family in the valley to give his life meaning, but he needed the wild, unforgiving freedom of his mountain kingdom to feel alive. These two properties weren't just houses, they were the opposing poles of his very nature, the loving, if overwhelmingly intense family man, and the solitary, rugged individualist who needed to feel the dirt beneath his fingernails to know he was real. The ranch wasn't just a fortress for his family, it became a fortress for his principles, and on one legendary occasion for his explosive temper. The most revealing story about the property, a piece of quiet Hollywood lore, involves a visit from one of the most powerful and feared military men of the 20th century, Air Force General Curtis LeMay. LeMay, the architect of American air power, was a friend of Connors and a fellow hunting enthusiast. During a visit to the ranch, LeMay, a man accustomed to acting with impunity, shot and killed a golden eagle, a majestic bird of prey and a federally protected species. When Connors discovered what had happened, he was transformed by a cold, righteous fury. This was his land, his personal sanctuary, and LeMay had violated not just its sanctity, but the law of the land. In that moment, the celebrity vanished, and the son of the Brooklyn longshoreman emerged. Without a moment's hesitation, the 6'6" actor confronted the four-star general. Accounts of the incident say Connors, his voice shaking with rage, snatched the general's expensive custom-made hunting rifle, smashed it to splinters against an oak tree, and physically escorted the stunned LeMay off his property, telling him in no uncertain terms to never return. This act of defiance against a man few would dare to even question reveals everything about Connors' profound connection to that land. It wasn't just real estate, it was his jurisdiction, a sovereign nation of one, where his moral code was the only law, and it was absolute. Famous guests were common at the ranch, but they came on his terms. His close friend Sammy Davis Jr., the epitome of Las Vegas cool, and a core member of the Rat Pack, was a frequent visitor. The image is beautifully surreal. The sleek, sophisticated entertainer navigating the dusty, rustic world that Connors had built. A world utterly alien to the neon-lit stages of the Sands Hotel. Their unlikely friendship was a testament to Connors' ability to bridge worlds, but the ranch always remained his world, governed by his rules. He had a peculiar ritual for new guests. He would often greet them at his front gate not with a cocktail and a handshake, but by handing them a tool, a shovel, a rake, a hammer, and putting them to work for an hour before any relaxation could begin. It was his way of testing them, of grounding them, of playfully reminding them that on his land, a person's value was measured in their willingness to contribute, not in the wattage of their celebrity. But behind the formidable walls of his fortress, the man himself was wrestling with demons that no amount of physical labor could exorcise. The very intensity and unbending nature that allowed him to tame a landscape made intimate relationships a constant struggle. His first marriage to his sweetheart Elizabeth ended in divorce in 1961, a casualty of the immense pressures of newfound fame and his demanding, all-consuming personality. In 1963, he married actress Kamala Devi, a woman he met on the set of the film Geronimo. That passionate, often turbulent marriage also ended in divorce a decade later. His third and final marriage to Faith Quabius in 1977 was the shortest of all. The man who so perfectly projected the ideal of the steadfast, devoted father on television was in his own life a man who found it impossible to maintain a lasting partnership. It seems the only enduring, unconditional love he could truly rely on was the love he felt for his 4 sons and for his land. The ranch was his constant, his solace, his most trusted confidant. It was the one relationship he could control completely. He could pour his titanic energy into its soil, and it would give back exactly what he put in. The land didn't argue. It didn't make emotional demands. It didn't threaten to leave. It simply was. For a man with such a powerful and at times difficult personality, this silent, loyal 400-acre expanse of earth may have been the most profound and successful relationship of his life. The end, when it came, was a cruel and swift betrayal by his own body. Throughout his adult life, Chuck Connors was a heavy smoker, a habit that was as much a part of his public image as his modified rifle. He was a man of his time, and in that time, smoking was equated with masculinity and cool composure. The habit reportedly reached 3 packs a day. In early November of 1992, after feeling unwell, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. The news was a profound shock. The man who seemed indestructible, who had battled baseball pitchers, NBA centers, and Hollywood producers with equal ferocity, was being felled by an insidious enemy from within. He died just 3 weeks after his diagnosis, on November 10, 1992, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 71 years old. His death left a colossal void, not just in the landscape of television nostalgia, but in the lives of his 4 sons, who now had to navigate a world without their magnetic, formidable father. He left behind a net worth estimated to be around $5 million, a respectable sum, but not the vast fortune one might expect from such an enduring and recognizable star. More importantly, he left behind the ranch. The kingdom was now without its king. What becomes of a place so inextricably linked to one man's identity after he is gone? The Chuck Connors Ranch could not be inherited in the same way one inherits a portfolio of stocks or a house in the suburbs. To inherit the ranch was to inherit a legacy of backbreaking work, a spiritual mantle, a connection to the land that no legal document could ever truly convey. For a time, the family tried to hold on to it, to keep the spirit alive. But a place like that requires a singular vision, an immense force of will to maintain. It required Chuck Connors. Eventually, inevitably, the ranch was sold. The kingdom was dissolved. The magnificent baseball diamond, once his personal field of dreams, slowly surrendered to the persistent desert weeds. The fences he built with his own hands began to weather and sag. The house that once echoed with his booming laughter and authoritative commands fell silent. Today the property is in private hands, its direct living connection to the Rifleman fading with each passing season. It has become in essence an abandoned house, not abandoned to physical rot and decay, but abandoned by the colossal spirit that gave it life. It exists now as a ghost, a memory map of one man's soul, etched onto the California landscape. Looking back, the story of Chuck Connors and his homes is not a simple tale of celebrity real estate. It is a profound and poignant meditation on the desperate search for authenticity in a world of pervasive artifice. He was a man who played a hero on screen, but perhaps his most heroic act was the private, non-televised creation of a world where he could be his truest, most complicated, and most vulnerable self. The ranch wasn't an escape from reality. For him, it was an escape to reality. It was the place he could finally shed the heavy costume of Lucas McCain and be Kevin Connors, the boy from Brooklyn who just wanted a space big enough to contain the vastness of his dreams and the contradictions of his heart. The final enduring image is not of him on a soundstage brandishing his trick rifle. It is the image of a giant of a man standing alone on his immaculate baseball field in the middle of a mountain wilderness, the setting sun casting impossibly long shadows across the infield. He stands there not as a celebrity, not as a husband, not even as a father, but as a man in perfect, silent harmony with the world he has built with his own two hands, a world that understood him, a world that was finally big enough for him. The house, the land, the legacy, they are what's left of that quiet, monumental, and deeply human effort. They are the silent witnesses to the fact that for some men, a home is not just a place to live. It is the last great stand against a world that never truly understands.